So I just want to preface this whole talk with expressing how I feel upset. Pretty much every day I feel sad and very frustrated in many ways, primarily regarding people's lack of applied intelligence. And I don't mean to harmfully insult anyone's intelligence or hurt anyone or deter them from exercising their intelligence in whatever way they feel is best for them and for those around them. But I do feel extremely upset every day, and I cry every day, um, because of many things that are happening that could just be a whole lot easier and better for everyone if they applied their intelligence better. So I'd like to read this and share this with you for today, for the 4th of July, for Independence Day here, because Independence Day means a lot of different things to different people, and ideally it means liberty and uh, a sense of respectful unity within that liberty. To me, it doesn't necessarily mean that to everyone, and there's a lot of really good reasons for that. And so that's what I'd like to start. Just before I read this whole thing that I've written to share with everyone today, because I feel there's a lot of really important things on people's hearts and minds that gets expressed in a lot of different ways that not everyone sees. So that's my motivations and intentions for sharing what I've written from my heart here. What does Egyptian dental health have to do with racism today? Well, here we go. The bombs bursting in air. Lise, one can make the stretch from a flag to a shoe as the transference of a symbol physically. Happy American Independence Day. Egyptian civilization was a system ruled by symbols that maintained a hierarchical structure with slaves at its base. Those members of Egypt who bought into the symbols and stories told about those symbols maintained the unity within the hierarchy of power as social structures agreed to by members of society, to the degree that those members continued to buy into the legitimacy of the stories told through those systems of symbols. Most Egyptians ate sugary diets they enjoyed, but that killed them due to lack of dental care. Not even wooden teeth were a practical option for even middle class ancient Egyptians, and so they did not have the life expectancy of even folks like George Washington, who still did not live very long compared to people today, or in the times of, say, Noah or Abraham, according to stories from the Bible. Ancient Egyptian society maintained its power structure through stories told about the sun, stars, planets as astrological legends pertaining directly to the earth and the daily lives of people on it. So there was a common religious justification for the power structure, featuring Pharaoh at the top, slaves at the bottom, and the various castes in between that maintained that hierarchy. Interestingly, I hear that after the Battle of Yorktown, and awareness spread that the colonies had won independence through the signing of the Treaty of Paris, George Washington got off his horse and did not want to be king or even president. He was, but he was, the only one that all the various factions could trust in the face of so many diverse disagreements regarding how to even build a country together after defeating the injustices of monarchy as colonial imperialism. Questions like how loose or strong of a union should exist for these 13 colonies, each with unique interests and concerns. So now I look at symbols regarding where we came from and questions of unity through that. In a broader historical sense, we all come from Africa, and very few people in ancient times did not know of Egypt as the first great civilization. And later, the Roman Empire touched the lives of almost everyone living in the Mediterranean, most of Europe, and much of Asia and North Africa. The narrative regarding America is often one of an empire in decline. Yet, unlike Egypt or Rome, this empire's foundations in that somewhat legendary flag of 13 five-pointed stars in a circle. Well, I just find it funny that while that flag represents a concept of unity and independence, and was even supposedly made by a woman from Pennsylvania, a northern state that later fought to preserve the Union and end slavery. So I just see how it is rather strange that people associate that flag with slavery slash racism. Except that if we look at the fact that the entire way of life in America at the time the flag was made was very much based materially in the facts of slavery. Even for those living in areas that had no slaves, since they benefited from the broader economy that existed with physical slavery at its underlying material base. So, in this broader narrative of history repeating itself with variations, what I see as a false narrative of the fall of an American empire slash civilization and the rising threat of a more unified and materially pragmatic Chinese civilization. Well, I say it is a false narrative because the key transition I claim we are experiencing here globally is a transition from predominant narratives framed in terms of power over to more accurate narratives of power with, which is the necessary narrative for breaking out of the fear and cycles of violence in so many ways between many people all over the world, and especially between humans and our broader biotic communities in nature. While physical slavery as ownership of fellow humans as property may have technically ended with the Emancipation Proclamation, 13th Amendment, and the preservation of the Union through Civil War, the economic and material facts of life for many, both within America and globally, have been arguably based on tacit acceptance of wage slavery and even active promotion of capitalism and modern development as the best means of bringing everyone hamburgers, jeeps, cell phones, fireworks, etc. And in many ways, capitalism has come through and advanced many people all over the world materially, and often at great cost ecologically and culturally, through transitioning into wage slavery and losing the often greater material wealth of healthy ecosystems and rich narratives of those now ravaged landscapes that exist as the physical and material basis for modern American life, allowing people to enjoy the kinds of material benefits in America, like low priced gas and low cost drugs like sugar, and many diverse substances, legal and illegal. So that is part of where the teeth of Egyptians come into relevancy. If you have populations of people happily eating sugary fruits without attending to the fact that that very way of life rests materially upon hierarchical systems of power over the workers at the bottom, both domestically and abroad, then those middle class members of the hierarchy will be in for serious wake up calls from many angles that each get processed in diverse ways, uniquely based on the symbols and stories told about them, and how well people believe those stories well enough to ascribe to the narratives. So, my claim, from what I see of the narrative at ground level, witnessing people resorting to belligerent nostalgias of just not giving a F, and people then seeing people further resorting to appropriately pub like drawings of symbols on napkins, and even burning those napkins inside or outside the pub, generally. Just from feelings of impotence, many recognize in these breakdowns of symbols no longer supplying effective, accurate narratives being told through them. So, while I see the very great benefit in pub style opportunities for talks, whereby a substance like alcohol can loosen people up and get them to speak more honestly, I also see the great benefit of a substance like cannabis to likewise also open conversations with more respect for common human empathy than a drug like alcohol, while also getting people more honest with their emotions. But I do not feel that cannabis is for everyone, nor is it even effective enough. Plus, features too many undesired side effects like anxiety that can actually get people less likely to open up socially. However, I strongly feel and see very good reason to advocate truth so everyone knows that open, honest, and more basically empathic conversations will seriously emerge through pharmacological consideration and your intent to speak to that. This system of lies regarding behavioral economics and behavioral pharmacology is the central point in the system of symbols people move through in our daily lives that will easily dismantle through commonplace inspection of its fallacies. That is the serious discussion regarding mental slavery and the sugar that the middle classers love to rot their teeth and brains with. Interestingly, most people who consume amphetamines for whatever reason and in whatever pattern of consumption do not rot their teeth and consume them for personal reasons, generally involving some kind of medical intent. The medicine to reliably open people, though, without much risk of undesired side effects like anxiety or belligerence, is in fact likely any variety of amphetamine like MDA, which is known to take hardened violent criminals from hateful thugs to upstanding and contributing members of their communities. So clearly, it will benefit the broader learning environments to consider seriously that many people see global leaders as various bands of violent thugs. And so, therefore, it makes sense that if children learn math and reading better with medicines like dextroamphetamines, and can easily see past mere double talk like math, not meth, and if bands of criminal thugs learn basic human empathy through the medicinal consumption of amphetamines like MDA, then it just makes sense to suggest that for the health of the brains and teeth of everyone in the world, in any pyramid, or even beyond hierarchies, to seriously suggest that these world leaders all sit down and not drink alcohol or smoke cannabis together, but consume something like MDA and come out with honest and loving solutions to world issues that embrace a logic of cooperation and promote narratives of power with rather than power over. If kids can learn math with pharmaceutical speed, it stands to reason that murderous global leaders can learn their paths to loving redemption through trusted pharmaceutical intervention. Remember the tooth. Do no harm. Medically trusted throughout the Imperium. Who really wants to talk about weapons inspectors in Iran when we could talk more seriously about promoting an agenda of peace through civil and reasonable means via advertising campaigns to sweeten the gas tanks and uranium rods with medicines known to work in ways that allow practical solutions to emerge for these diverse conflicts based in ideology, resource discrepancies, and even ancestral hatred that all dissolve into the emergence of pragmatic solutions from more truly loving ways, respectful to the interests of all involved. Since I can honestly think of no better way to truly get to know someone, since I can honestly think of no better way to truly get to know someone from as close to walking around in the skin of another person than to dose with that person and seriously get down to the grit of healing and emergence with new and emerging with new solutions far beyond far more honorably than tweeting further nonsense about trade wars, walls, weapons inspectors, when underneath all three of these big double U's is a big M. Money. Happy 4th of July. That's the big money right there. So, let me back up for a sec here. Seriously get down to the grit of healing and emerging with new solutions far more honorably than tweeting further nonsense about trade wars, walls, weapons, and specters. When underneath all three of those big W's, big M, money, it all ends. The wars end. The walls melt. The weapons become as irrelevant as spies and inspectors once we all get on the same page regarding the Earth and the role of humans within diverse ecosystems all over the world. Aware now to the fact we must move past our historic disagreements featuring strategic narratives of unity in order for power over the other into new narratives of power with any other we may encounter. Power with. Gee whiz. And just a field sobriety test works better. And that includes a test for minimally biased, basic human empathy. Like, would you offer someone water for free who is going to die of thirst? The thirst this world is dying of is a lack of basic human empathy by thuggish global leaders. And that is a thirst quenched easily by numerous Schedule 1 substances we will be wise in advocating proper treatment with and in the highest priority of access to these medical technologies given to global leaders most primarily. Lower level conflicts all benefit as well. So I think it is wise to apply this logic to the tops of each pyramid, and perhaps quite likely we will see better dental care the world over. Likely, far less people will feel like slaves to a-hole bosses if their bosses just dose too. Top to bottom, bottom to top. It really doesn't matter. But structurally and materially, everyone benefits with access to the serum, which again we must advocate most primarily that the top positions of power open up and come out for sane and reasonable means of global peace by getting these head honchos consensually dosed for the benefit of everyone. Now, I would just love to be able to advocate everyone read root source texts like the Emerald tablets of the Haute Liatine and learn basic alchemy and astrology like Offset puts forward through her Lucid Living channel. But I simply do not see that as an effective approach these days, sadly, merely because most people simply lack the time and interest in reading and studying esoteric texts, more foundational to our sets of language and symbols today than even the Constitution or the Bible, which I love both of, by the way. I must interject to say I am a deep lover of both the United States Constitution and the Bible. And I look to many other texts as well, as does Asset, in honoring and looking into and really looking deeply into the Emerald Tablets. I'm going off the scripture to promote things that if you do have the time to look into alchemy, astrology of any culture, I highly, highly, highly suggest that. It can be beneficial in many ways to many practices. But I simply do not see that as an effective approach these days. Sadly, merely because most people simply lack the time and interest in reading and studying esoteric texts more foundational to our sets of language and symbols today than even the Constitution or the Bible. Which is why I advocate that people more generally just advocate more broadly for microdosing LSD, MDA, etc., since these present the best options for minimal risk of nausea, anxiety, or other undesired side effects, in order to just open people up to better communication intentionally. Intent and impact are the two sides to everything. Figure that into the equation of making sense of everything. Intent and impact. People naturally consider their intentions and impacts when regularly microdosing LSD, better than just smoking weed and eating sugar. Egypt was great, but most died of rotten teeth. The road to truth is not always pretty. Facing cultural and even ancestral demons intentionally and accepting the impacts. Well, that is just an honest effect of LSD, which is why getting people past white guilt is a lot like getting people off sugar and on the road of healing through direct and open access to truth, without need for esoteric or even mundane texts. See how racism and the teeth of those benefiting from slavery all relate now in interestingly recurring ways. There are easy ways to see racism end from the outset that may not feel easy for those living it, but that is by getting the foulest mix of racists all in a room together, with an equal number of people experienced with seeing racism overcome through pharmacological aid. And then just let the medicine do its work with those who clearly need it most, but would obviously not be likely to seek it out themselves, without better advertising, and perhaps even direct intervention in the name of sanity. That we no longer see a world where many people often accurately label leaders insanely inhuman, when we simply have pharmacological remedies for these kinds of situations, on both individual and broader social scales, very worth considering. Even just for the simple fact that people love good dental plans anywhere in the world, and we are more likely to arrive at a world that affords more people those privileges more quickly by overcoming the ideological and resource disputes we currently see, often with deep ancestral and racial roots. That that all go through major adjustments by getting world leaders into the mental, emotional state of embracing narratives of power with, that thus prevent the waste of unnecessary conflicts and simply open greater access to the good life of both eating sugar and receiving decent dental care. Source consciousness does not lie to anyone regarding the true roots, dental or otherwise. Programming is serious business, especially regarding the narrative in media of America and China during this transition of global civilization into power with, from power over. Specifically, we must know the most critical distinction between China and America is not seen in material pragmatism versus wastefulness, but in oppressive totalitarianism versus open information. China's current strategy of cultural unity through controlling information by tossing Tibetan, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish texts all into the same pile and burning them together while censoring gangster content from children's educational media, well, that is not going to be effective, and they know that. Atheistic materialism may function pragmatically and economically for groups of people culturally conditioned into that form of atheism for political unity that we see currently in China today. But the fact is that oppressing all religious views means that China has not become an open society and will have to find a means to relate to the world in way in oh yeah, just close it. Sorry, I'm recording this, sorry. Atheistic materialism may function pragmatically and economically for groups of people culturally conditioned into that form of atheism for political unity that we currently see in China today. But the fact is that oppressing all religious views means that China has not become an open society and will have to find a means to relate to the world in more broadly cultural ways, just as America has always been learning to, even since those foundations as a mixed society and rising economy with historical roots in the atrocities of physical slavery that have shifted into neo-colonial imperialism hallmarked by wage slavery. And that kind of mental slavery I have addressed here regarding the facts of behavioral economics and behavioral pharmacology. Facts that allow for both more harmonious free trade and genuinely respectful cultural pluralism. And I think genuinely respectful cultural pluralism is exactly Tim's point when he says, the meaning representing the beginning of a brighter future to shoot for, which was and still is the point in the long run, isn't it? Now, getting back to that flag and those shoes, those nice new Nikes, I find it very, very fascinating that Betsy Ross just preferred the five-pointed star to the six-pointed star for the simple reason that it was an easier shape to cut. The five-pointed star is also the shape of the graph of both the mathematical musical theory presented by John Coltrane, and it is the shape of a graph of the movement of Venus as observed from Earth, with the 5 points being the times that its apparent motion from Earth is retrograde to the direction it ordinarily moves through the sky, from one night to the next. This five-pointed star pattern, seen throughout nature, as in flowers, in the common form of any creature, in the general outline of two arms, two legs, one head, this tendency to twinkle is also, by legend, what allows Venus to appear most beautifully, the brightest in the sky, and thus considered the point of light most associated with beauty. So Venus, the beautiful star, what allows Venus to appear most beautifully, the brightest star in the sky, and thus considered the point of light most associated with beauty, both for its more sensual features like twinkling brightly, and for its greater sense of balance and harmony in relations with any one just encounters. Links here to Open Culture's Tone Circle with John Coltrane's drawing and Star World's blog spot, The Venus Cycles post. Regarding intentions and impacts, the thing about it all, from any side, is just that when there's someone in your head and it's not you, even as the clouds burst thunder in your ears, when the lunatic is in your head, well, tends to rearrange you till you're sane, just via this bizarre process known as intense human empathy for those one labels as mentally ill. I know that sounds like an inside out view of sanity, or it may sound like an inside out view of sanity, but it is honestly the way many people see the world today, regarding needing to learn greater empathy toward the seemingly insane people at the top, the bottom, and everywhere in between. We all have different experiences we come from, and everyone experiences source consciousness uniquely. But the reliable fact that these unique experiences of common source through diverse pharmacological options must be regarded as the most timely option present to overcome racism and totalitarian information agendas of all types, because it just works. And it works so darn well regardless of cultural background and any unique constellations of biases, prejudices, traumas, with so much finger pointing and name calling, and I must note, in proper context and with proper intention, with so much finger pointing and name calling of insanity. Insanity. People are calling each other insane here, all over the place. With so much finger pointing and name calling of insanity from any of the sides, upon any other, in repeatedly inept attempts to overpower through increasingly shallow rhetoric. Many now agree with just sound reason to take seriously these lifelong non-voters like comedians, like comedian George Carlin, the kind of atheist who has a deep and serious respect for bullshit, where he sees it in ways people understand and agree with, as just intelligent people who tend not to vote unless or until someone says something honest and reasonable. Like, plug the thugs into source consciousness for a more compassionate and sane world that surpasses the ideological and resource distribution issues of the past for the recognition and acceptance of a broader human family, finding its rightful place in a biotic community of trust, acceptance, and tolerance. I'm going to read that again. talking to non-voters here, the people who are non-understanding what non-voters are upset about for so long. And that is that many now agree, with just sound reason, to take seriously these lifelong non-voters like comedian George Carlin, the kind of atheist who has a deep and serious respect for bullshit, where he sees it in ways people understand and agree with, as just intelligent people who tend not to vote unless or until someone says something honest and reasonable, like plug the thugs into source consciousness for a more compassionate and sane world that surpasses the ideological and resource distribution issues of the past, for the recognition and acceptance of a broader human family, finding its rightful place in a biotic community of trust, acceptance, and tolerance, most especially tolerance for what one may not understand, though seriously poses no serious threat. Since again, we are transitioning into a state of recognizing the mutual benefits of power with any potential other. Once us humans fully step into that kind of narrative as official policy, our options as responsible people will obviously open greatly to many, just merely based on the question of how radically open to being odd will you find yourself willing to accept? And that is just a personal question anyone may ask from within one's center in relation to any phenomena one encounters, no matter how bizarre or seemingly unrelated it may appear on the surface or even at its depths. The lack of root canal options for middle-class ancient Egyptians is not directly related to how many Americans simply love sugar from any source. But now let us consider the pros and cons of three crops: sugarcane, tobacco, and cotton. Sugar rots one's teeth, yet provides cellular energy necessary for work. Tobacco clears one's head as a stimulant that aids focused work, learning, and memory, yet damages lungs and other organs. Cotton covers one's back in the cold, yet a cotton gin displaces workers from the ability to offer meaningful labor in ways that support one's ability to meet one's basic needs, provide for one's family, like food, shelter. Now let us look at China's history with tobacco, throughout which its people became rapidly addicted to a foreign crop of increasingly high demand that simultaneously culled its own consumers due to health threats associated with that addiction to this foreign plant, especially when mixed with opium. Thank goodness the human drive for independent health decisions with one's body and resources have truly come a long way since tobacco was introduced to China and first mixed with opium. Whew. And while many disagree regarding the most pressing forms of oppression worth overcoming, responsibility for one's life, and common liberty all have roots in complex narratives of American history regarding race and labor in ways that are very important for many people to understand regarding transitioning from a failed American empire to a broader sense of power with any who will cooperate with the ideals of open trade without any threat of oppressive agenda. Yes, you can eat your sugar and have a dental plan too. Meanwhile, I observe the complex narratives regarding race from as many diverse sources as possible. And I see this emerging narrative especially in entertainment medias like film and music. Many are familiar with classic films like The Color Purple, but not everyone listens to music speaking directly to the realities of race in America today. So I would like to share a brief set of songs, worth at least listening to in order to get a specific sense for why many reasonable people just don't vote and just how clearly many diverse people of how many diverse groups of people see through the lies I have spelled out here regarding behavioral economics and behavioral pharmacology. First song, American by Macklemore. Childish Gambino, This is America. TINZ, This is Iraq. See what has spread in the corrupt name of freedom and the failed American imperialism that is just beginning to learn the transition from a narrative of power over to a narrative of power with, an appropriate and reasonable sense of common human empathy. Well, now let's look a little deeper. Kendrick Lamar, The Blacker the Berry, and the interview from MTV, Kendrick Lamar still feeling angry and hatred on The Blacker the Berry, Part 3, MTV News. Joyner Lucas, I'm not a racist, just to get a broader view of current conversations involving race. My son, I'm not racist remix. Joan Baez, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Live, Norway, 78. John 9 featuring Von Ekibeke Benjamin. Greatest threat to the status quo. It's a spiritual quote. Naomi Elliott, Survival of the Mental Health System. Institutional Racism, BBC interview. I'm going to repeat that one. Naomi Elliott, Survival of the Mental Health System, Institutional Racism, BBC interview. I feel there is a massive cultural misunderstanding that is taking place. Prejudices that come out as professional opinions. Uncle Sam's on Mars. Martian Disco Stomp, live, 1984, Hawkwind. An interestingly British view of the American flag. Macklemore's White Privilege. Commentaries on that. Kanye West, Runaway. Full-length film. I like to end just noting a most important point. I like to end. Takes me a while sometimes. Most times. I like to end just noting a most important point I saw Kanye West make in a recent interview with David Letterman, available on Netflix. Kanye West drew attention to the fact that the 13th Amendment only guarantees freedom from slavery and indentured servitude for those who have committed no crime. But if it is a crime for a slave to read, then reading amounts to a crime that could result in forced labor, likely based on a racial basis, often we see. Okay, so the analogy for today is that reading may not be illegal, but it is very much illegal to open the hood and get a personal sense for how the neural gears work directly, even with the supervision of a physician. And this is the reason so many people live in prison today, just for attempting to read the human body's user manual, by smoking weed or consuming other substances that give one direct experience with one's mind and body, and often even one's own genetics directly. Which is why those of us who have gone there know how absurd it truly is to see scientists, politicians, and doctors still making decisions from a pre-LSD paradigm, when the fact is now increasingly well known that low doses of LSD allowed Sir Francis Crick to first successfully visualize the molecular structure of DNA, to the point of accurately identifying its chemical structure and its amazing nature as the informational code through which virtually all known biological structures exist. This is a really big deal when seen in the context of an increasingly common position of zero confidence in those who fail to read the book directly through LSD and continue to deny access to those natural mechanics of liberty offered to any mind, body, who consumes LSD in that proper intention to learn one's mind and body directly. So if reading the universal paper of liberty is illegal, then anyone may be imprisoned and forced into labor, denied liberty, just for attempting to read the universal script, eat a tab. It does not matter one's educational background or native language even. Everyone loves fireworks. It does not matter one's educational background or native language even, in order for LSD to simply clear up the layers of cultural confusions, in order to come to a lasting place of understanding and tolerance for all cultures that allows new forms of cooperation to emerge, like in a state of emergency. And the funny thing is that in many older people who have consumed LSD and found themselves freed up into a lasting space of universal human empathy, find themselves dumbfounded that people like Trump continue to promote racist and oppressive policies, when the obvious reason for this is that these racists have simply not had the necessary transpersonal experiences required for common human empathy. And the fact I continue to see people confused and whining about the existence of racism in our world today, without most primarily promoting the sound and reasonable means of seeing humanity out of its conundrums of privilege, power, discrimination, stereotyping, biases, prejudices of all kinds. Well, I just feel sick about this every day, literally. I feel sick every day I see people like you, Lise, and my dad, just like not getting it, or playing stupid or something. Jesus, function Christ already. Tell the damn truth. People are generally full of shit until they get real and drop LSD. Period. Trains. Training day. Groundhog's Day. Stripes. Every effing day. My life. It sucks. Because I see people like you two in Canada just not getting it. Not appearing to. I've been saying the same thing since I learned to speak English. It pains my heart every damn day. Quit being stupid with what you know already. And thank you, Dad, for writing out facts accurately and at minor length, even in the face of potential to draw fire from any old or young imbecile. About freaking time. L is for love. Like, seriously, I am dumbfounded by how non-integrally, and essentially non-lovingly, I continue to see the thinking of otherwise intelligent adults, capable of this kind of integration, with or without taking LSD. Look at the intents. Look at the potential impacts. Quit acting stupid. I do not even consume LSD, but I recognize it for what it is. A means for people to better understand what I have just found obvious my entire life. A sense of universal pattern, inference, an ability to play creatively with programming. In the loosest sense, ideally for the greatest benefit of everyone. This is simple. This is really simple. Codes, programming, stories from the past, working with them together for the benefit of everyone, future generations. Well, sometimes a periscope takes its time to find a target. It's good to have torpedo bays loaded with the right stuff and just take a shot. How can you honestly expect people to rapidly overcome their deeply conditioned biases and prejudices, while not openly and directly advocating that they go for the safest and most reliable means known for anyone to become accomplished in the basic human empathy program through appropriate chemical means? Offer people the appropriate universal tools, and they will learn. Free the lucid. quote from where this originated in discussion a few days ago. Most Egyptians died of teeth and gums complications, generally from eating too much sugar without antimicrobials or cavity protection like celery juice, which features high quantities of sodium fluoride the plant absorbs as fluoride, occurring naturally in even the best organic soils, or even straight from the garden hose of an area, enriching its water with even smaller amounts than the celery plants absorb. Well, anyways, many Egyptians developed microbial overgrowths from eating sugary fruits, like dates and figs. And these were directly on the gums and even into the brains of many people in ancient Egypt, before the development of dental oils like cloves, cardamom, and ingredients common to blends known as thieves' oil, which protected thieves later from the Black Plague in Europe when pillaging dead bodies. Yet these oil blends also prevent overgrowth of bacteria in gums and dental cavities. One of the most common dreams people report are dreams of having their teeth go loose and fall out. I have always loved the Egyptian reverence for Bastet, the cat head. Many people also dream of lovely times in Egypt. Imagine that. Life being good for people, just not living long due to rotten teeth and gums. Plus, Egyptian society was mostly based on slavery. And many dream of those situations too. While still most people's ancestors left that ancient civilization from its roots before it rose, or any time during the many directions of Exodus throughout that empire's rise and fall. I always love talking about dreams of Egypt. Ever been to Atlantis? Socrates was put to death for corrupting the youth of Athens by getting people to logically consider many of their assumptions and superstitions. Plus, I find it interesting Socrates spoke well of Atlantis as an advanced civilization predating Egypt. Now, just to be clear, I am not calling anyone out as racist. I am just calling out all the idiots who even talk about racism without getting real, and coming out with the well-known, scientifically documented, rapid fuhkin fixes to these social issues, like LSD, MDA, etc. Get fucking real, people. Whining about racism without bringing up the quick and real effin' fixes like LSD is about as damn stupid as saying me too without presenting MDA or LSD as serious medicines that reliably help people heal that trauma. Quit lying. Quit dipping the scoop in poop. And dunk it in the truth. Truly worth shoveling around to everyone with a tongue or a wheelbarrow full of American graffiti. Please, quit making yourself look stupid to elites like myself by whining about social justice issues without mentioning LSD as the honest fix. It's just, we're BS time over, people. Come on. I am really miserably sick of it. I cry every damn day. And I do not block anyone for whining like a miserable idiot. Finally, please note the simple fact that the Black Panthers smuggled Tim Leary out of a U.S. federal prison after the feds had him busted by planting joints on him. Think about why exactly would the Black Panthers smuggle an old white intellectual out of prison but not everyone else? What a serious risk. A few more songs to close. Grateful Dead. U.S. Blues. Love the sound of them bombs bursting in air. Let's end the bombing, yeah? Let's step real damn up. Next song, Genius, featuring Sia, Diplo, Labyrinth. Sorry if I'm saying those names wrong. And that's their LSD right there. Genius, featuring Sia, Diplo, and Labyrinth. Check out that music video. It's some great animation. And that Grateful Dead U.S. Blues music video is also some great animation for the 4th of July. You know, a lot of really good people love the Star Spangled Banner. Many colors. Goes great with Purple Haze. I think that's how Hendrix played at Woodstock. I'm not sure. But you know, nearly 7 years ago, Congress passed a racist law, making it a crime to manufacture and distribute marijuana. You catching up now? If it is a crime to practice your religion or preferred form of medicine, then according to the 13th Amendment, you can still be put to work as unpaid prison labor. Most trimmers today get paid direct in product, which may vary quite widely in price from state to state. And risk. Interstate commerce is a serious issue for everyone. Most Americans just want to enjoy sugar without dental issues, nicotine without lung cancer, and textiles without slave labor. Those are all American desires that have nothing to do with race, except for the fact that sugarcane, tobacco, and cotton are all crops once primarily grown by slaves. Most Egyptians would have wanted the same, regardless of rank in society. Effin rank! Just rank. Blow chit up today. Happy 4th. I rank. Benji 2020. My name is Benjamin Barkowski, and I wrote this because I understand these issues well enough to serve in ways agreeable to pretty much everyone willing to embrace the logic of cooperation. And the safest, most secure adult means of rapidly developing empathy, even in the most traumatized and marginalized people like poor old Trump, dose them heads, and all reps, consensually and legally. Let's see what the right to try act is good for. Better living through better chemistry. Feed whose head? Oh, for Pence sake, it just makes too much sense. Is a census even needed? I implore you to quit even mentioning what you see as false in this world, and even very well worth whining about, without bringing up an honest means of transcending one's biases regarding what one really does not like, and seriously just advocate the quickest means of seeing common truth together in basic human empathy, just because it works, and you know it. If you don't know it, just look at any of the latest or most ancient research regarding LSD. Similar stuff from plants, molds, fungi, and toads that usually produce more unwanted nausea in ways that aid the purging process physically. LSD is just simply the clearly preferred medicine all may recommend for every garden variety form of racism, sexism, bigotry, malicious intentions of all kinds, and even ordinary human perceptual biases. Get real. Happy Independence Day, America. Go love thy neighbor. Oh, check out this Malcolm X on Front Page Challenge, 1965, CBC Archives. Thank you, Canada. Good night. I love you. Seriously. Love thy neighbor.